Your business is pathetic, my brother boasted, humiliating me in front of his friends. I cut him off. Weeks later, he begged for my help, broke. My brother belittled the effort I put in while his buddies were present, insisting I'd perpetually struggle financially. Consequently, I completely distanced myself from him and allowed him to face the consequences of his actions. When we were young, Patrick, my older brother, and I were always together. We were the type of siblings who shared everything, from our toys to our secret jokes and our hopes for later in life. I was the reserved, dependable sibling. He was the assertive, self-assured one. If somebody had told me back then that our relationship would end up like this, barely talking, I would have thought they were wrong. But as I reflect on things, I now understand there were subtle issues that we had from the start. Little things I disregarded at the time. A sarcastic remark here, a subtle insult there. I never took them too seriously, until just last month when Patrick embarrassed me in front of his friends. That was the pivotal moment everything altered. I should provide some context. I manage a modest landscaping business, nothing extraordinary, yet it's all my own. I founded it from nothing half a decade ago after abandoning a miserable office job. The work is tough, yet I thoroughly enjoy it. There's a real sense of accomplishment in transforming a barren plot of ground into someone's ideal garden. It's not a particularly exciting line of work, yet I rest peacefully at night knowing I've constructed something tangible, something authentic. Patrick, however, chose a very different road. He's always been the showy one, the type who loves to brag about his influential finance position, his expensive apartment, and his vacations to Cabo. And that's great. I've never felt any yearning for his way of living. I'm content with my own, more straightforward existence. Or I was asterisk content until Patrick started making me feel like I should be embarrassed about it. The whole thing took place at a family dinner. It was one of those occasions that are few and far between, where everyone, myself, Patrick, our mom, Pamela, and a handful of Patrick's buddies were together at Mom's place. It wasn't strange at all that Patrick had invited his friends. He always enjoyed being the center of attention. His friends were the sort who wear those shoes without socks and use business jargon with a straight face. I didn't exactly blend in with them, but I wasn't about to cause a commotion. I was simply hopping to enjoy the evening with Mom and head home. The first sign of trouble appeared early on. Patrick presented me to his friends with this strange, mocking air. "This is my younger brother, Herbert," he said. Well, let's just say he's more of a get-your-hands-dirty sort of guy." They all started laughing like he'd said the funniest thing in the world, but I just managed a strained smile. Whatever. I've gotten used to overlooking those little jabs. However, as the evening went on, Patrick's remarks became more and more unpleasant. "So, Herbert," he said, interrupting me mid-sentence and speaking very loudly, "how's that landscaping business treating you? Still working yourself to the bone for practically nothing." His friends snickered, and one of them chimed in, "I could never do physical labor. My back would give out in a week." I attempted to shrug it off, telling myself they didn't mean any real harm. "It's going great," I replied in a level tone. "Just got a big contract with a new client, Patrick." I lifted an eyebrow. "Seriously, what now? Another lawn improvement job in the suburbs? Or am I finally getting to work on something substantial?" The room erupted in more laughter. My gut churned, but I plastered a smile on my face. It's actually a corporate campus revamp, which is a pretty big deal for my career. Patrick's expression briefly changed. Maybe he was surprised. Then he grinned and remarked, "Well, let's just hope they pay you on time." I've heard that small businesses always struggle with money. By this time, I was holding my fork so hard that my knuckles were turning white, but I kept silent. What was the use of starting a fight? Things really got worse when they served dessert. Patrick, clearly enjoying the attention, decided to share a little anecdote. He said, gesturing towards me with his wine glass, "You know, Herbert once told me he wanted to be a millionaire before he turned 30. You remember that, buddy?" I felt completely still. I had said that when I was 16. It was a foolish ambition from long ago, and he knew it. Then Patrick went on laughing. "I guess life had different plans, didn't it? But hey, at least you're pursuing your passion, right?" His buddies started laughing loudly. One of them clapped Patrick on the back and said, "You're harsh, man." I glanced at my mom, hoping she'd say something, but all she gave me was a helpless, awkward smile. It seemed she didn't want to take a side. Like she didn't want to upset the atmosphere. That's when Patrick delivered the final blow. "You know, some people are just meant to be the poor ones in the family," he said with a smirk. "There's no reason for you to feel bad, Herbert. Somebody has to keep things in perspective, right?" I'd love to say I jumped up and delivered an inspiring speech about perseverance and pride. But the truth is, I didn't. I just sat there with my cheeks on fire while everyone was cracking up. I felt like a complete idiot, like I was a burden. After a short while, I stood up, muttered something about having to go, and took off. I didn't even say so long to my mom. I just jumped in my truck and started driving. The whole drive back, my thoughts were all over the place. Was this Patrick's true character? Had I just been ignoring it? Or had his achievements made him into this pompous, superior person? When I finally got back, the anger had faded. I was simply finished. Finished trying to gain his approval. Finished acting like we had some special brotherly relationship. Finished letting him treat me poorly. That was the night I made up my mind. I was going to remove Patrick from my life. No grand declaration, no heated argument, just complete quiet. If he couldn't show me respect, he didn't deserve my attention or effort. What I didn't realize at the time was just how much Patrick depended on me, and how soon he'd wish he hadn't ruined that connection. News flash. Following that family dinner, I went totally silent towards Patrick. No messages, no phone calls, no trips to my mom's when I knew he'd be present. It wasn't like I sent him a dramatic, "it's over" type of text. I just stopped interacting. Initially, I figured he wouldn't even notice. Patrick is the type who always has a crowd around him. My brother's friends, colleagues, and even his temporary girlfriends. Why should he care if his loser sibling wasn't in touch? Nonetheless, he did notice. Oh yes, he absolutely did. During that initial week, he sent me a couple of texts. "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you lately. Are you truly still upset about that meal? Don't be so sensitive." I just disregarded them. I thought he would eventually lose interest and drop it. Instead, those messages persisted, and they took a turn for the worse. "Wow, so this is how you're going to act? Pathetic. You know, if you can't take a bit of joking around, maybe you're not tough enough for real life." By the third week, his texts had changed from insults to full-blown attempts to make me feel guilty. "Mom's hurt that you're being so cold. She doesn't deserve this treatment. You're behaving like a self-centered, unappreciative child. I've done so much more for you than you'll ever know." The funny part, Patrick had never helped me that much. If anything, I had spent years striving to maintain peace between us, going out of my way to boost his ego. Now that I wasn't doing that anymore, he was clearly thrown off. At the same time, something unexpected began to occur. My life was going great, like remarkably great. After that dinner, I threw myself into my work with a level of concentration I hadn't experienced in ages. I secured 3 new clients, including a corporate campus makeover project that Patrick had made fun of me for. It was my largest project yet, and after I finished it, the company sent me a handwritten thank you note and a bonus check. I used that money to purchase a new truck, the identical model Patrick. He used to tease me because I couldn't afford things. To be frank, when I first drove that thing, I considered sending him a photo just to gloat a little. But then I came to the conclusion that I didn't care anymore. He wasn't deserving of the thought. Then Mom called. "Herbert, you need to speak with Patrick," she said, her voice filled with that particular brand of parental guilt. "Why, what's wrong?" I asked, even though I already suspected it didn't involve me. "Well, he's in a bit of a financial bind. He won't say it, but I know it. He's late on his rent and he had to get rid of his car." I rested against the kitchen counter, my jaw clenching. Patrick, the family's supposed success story, was having difficulties. The very same Patrick who over many years had flaunted his accomplishments to me. I'd be lying if I claimed I didn't feel a tiny spark of satisfaction. "What does any of that have to do with me?" I questioned, keeping my tone even. Mom paused. "You're doing well these days, aren't you? Perhaps you could lend him a hand, just a little bit. He's your brother, Herbert." There it was, the expected duty, the same old situation. Patrick causes problems and everyone else fixes them. "I'm not giving him any money, Mom," I declared without hesitation. "He doesn't value me and he's never showed any interest in my life. Why should I rescue him?" "Because he's family," she said gently, "and family supports one another." I felt like yelling. Instead, I just said, "He'll figure it out. He always does." Then I disconnected the call before she could try to convince me otherwise. That's when everything really went downhill. A week went by, and then, without any warning, Patrick appeared at my office. I was in the midst of a meeting with a customer when my secretary peeked in and said there was a man there to see me who claimed to be my sibling. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I instructed her to give me a few minutes to finish up, however. Patrick just walked right in, disregarding her objections. "Herbert, we need to speak," he stated, loud enough for everyone in the workplace to hear. I was so embarrassed. I immediately said I was sorry to my client and then guided Patrick into the corridor. "What in the world are you doing?" I whispered angrily. Patrick folded his arms, appearing more disheveled than I had ever seen him before. His typically refined and put-together demeanor was absent. His shirt was creased, and it seemed like he hadn't used any hair product in ages. "You're actually going to act like you don't hear me while I'm going through all of this," he blurted out. "Do you have any clue what I'm currently handling?" "I don't," I responded calmly, "because you've never taken the effort to keep me informed. Furthermore, bursting into my office isn't the way to resolve this." He let out a scoff. Oh, come on now, as if you're so occupied with your little landscaping company. Don't act as if you're too superior to assist your own brother. I felt my anger rising, but I maintained a level voice. I'm not too good, Patrick. I'm just fed up with being treated like I'm unimportant to you. If you came here to say you're sorry, we can converse. But if your aim is to make me feel guilty, you can go. Patrick regarded me like I had just physically struck him. For a brief moment, he seemed utterly bewildered, but then his expression grew stern. Fine. Told me, if you're going to act like you're better than everyone, then go right on ahead, he added, but don't expect any sympathy from me when you're in trouble down the road. And with that, he was gone. Now things became really unexpected after that. A few days later, I received a phone call from one of Patrick's buddies, the same guy who'd found Patrick's family joke to be so hilarious during dinner. Let's just say his name was Stephen. Hey, Herbert, Stephen said, sounding uncomfortable. I heard what's happening with Patrick. He mentioned you two aren't on good terms. Yeah, I responded carefully. What's up? Well, I don't know if he shared this with you, but he's in serious trouble with some terrible debts. Things like credit cards and payday loans, you name it, he's got it. He's been trying his best to conceal it, but it's starting to become a problem for him. I just thought you should be aware. I wasn't certain how to react. Why was Stephen divulging all of this to me? Was he trying to manipulate me, or did he truly care? I appreciate you telling me, I replied after a moment. However, Patrick's financial troubles are not my responsibility. Stephen let out a frustrated sigh. Yeah, I kind of assumed you'd say that. Just please keep an eye on him, all right? He's not in a good situation currently. I ended the call, my thoughts swirling. What was the true extent of Patrick's struggles, and just how bad was this going to become? For the record, Patrick was the type of person who always managed to bounce back, regardless of how irresponsible or careless he acted. Back then, he could talk his way out of difficult situations, convince instructors to give him extra time, and always locate someone willing to come to his rescue. I was joking about having 9 lives. I really believed he took me seriously, but this time I wasn't going to rescue him. For the initial time in his life, Patrick was about to experience the outcome of his actions entirely solo. It all began with a peculiar phone call from my mother. It was around a couple of weeks since Patrick had aggressively entered my workspace. Since then, I hadn't spoken to him, and truthfully, I had assumed and frankly wished that he had gotten the message and left me alone. Yet my mom phoned, her voice filled with palpable anxiety. Herbert, Patrick's been acting weird, she said. What do you mean? I questioned, already fearing what she was going to tell me. He's been fawning me at all times, asking for cash. He even proposed selling some of my jewelry to assist him. I declined, obviously, yet he's been so filled with desperation and anger. He's not acting like himself. I groaned, massaging my forehead. Mom, it's not your responsibility to fix it. I understand, she responded softly, but he is my child. I can't just sit back and watch him crumble. I felt like saying she could, that in some cases it's necessary to break down in order to evolve. But I understood she wouldn't agree. Patrick had always been her favorite, regardless of the trouble he caused. While I disliked that when I was younger, I understood it now as well. She cared about him, imperfections and all. Still, I didn't step in. I wasn't going to be his hero anymore, not after everything he had done. Then Patrick stooped to a whole new level. A few days later, I was taking supplies out of my phone vibrated as I was driving. It was a message from Patrick. He wrote, Herbert, we must speak if you will. The text was out of character for him. There was no joking around, no attempts to make me feel bad, just a simple phrase that had a serious weight to it. Though I probably shouldn't have, I texted back. What's happening? He answered right away. I require assistance. Part of me considered disregarding his message. I could have let him handle his issues on his own, just as I had previously told myself. But another piece of me, the facet that still felt something for him, despite what had gone on, had to understand the situation. Therefore, I gave him a call. His tone was a combination of anger and weariness when he answered. I'm in serious trouble, Herbert. I have people I owe money to constantly bothering me. I'm several months late on rent and I might be evicted. I have no other options. I said nothing for a moment, absorbing his words. Patrick, the man who always pretended to be in control of everything, was admitting for the first time that he wasn't. And while a small, spiteful piece of me was tempted to say I knew it, there was another feeling, possibly pity or maybe letdown. What precisely do you want from me? I asked. I need to borrow some money, he responded directly enough to get me moving again. I will repay you as soon as I can. I nearly chuckled. Patrick, you've looked down on me for so long, making fun of my business, my dedication, and now you're asking me for money. There was a lengthy break in the conversation. I'm desperate, Herbert, he finally admitted. I have no clue what else to attempt. It was the closest. It was a far better apology than any I'd previously received from him. Still, it wasn't sufficient. "Patrick, I'm sorry, but I'm unable to help you," I stated, knowing it would be tough, not this go-around. He didn't shout or debate, which was unexpected. Rather, he just said, "Okay," and ended the call. A flicker of doubt surfaced, and I questioned whether I'd acted correctly. The aftermath was a disaster. The next time I encountered Patrick was at my mother's residence. She'd asked me over for a meal, and though she hadn't explicitly mentioned his presence, his appearance at the table was no shock. He appeared awful, as if sleep had completely eluded him for ages. His usual assuredness was missing, supplanted by something I couldn't define. Perhaps it was fear. The meal initiated with an awkward air, Mom trying to ease the tension with casual conversation. However, it wasn't long before Patrick lost his temper. "So, Herbert," he began, his tone thick with sarcasm, "how's that landscaping business doing? Still making a killing?" I set my fork down and met his eyes. "It's going well, thanks for asking," I responded. He let out a cynical laugh. "Must be great, right? Some of us don't have it so good." "Patrick," Mom said gently, placing her hand on his arm, "don't start." "No, it's fine," I said, keeping my voice even. I understood his issue. Patrick was upset because I declined his request for assistance. But here's the reality. It has nothing to do with good fortune or lack thereof. It's about the decisions one makes. And you, my friend, have made some really terrible ones. The space became quiet. Patrick's face flushed, and for a moment I genuinely believed he was about to erupt. But in place of an outburst, he simply shoved his chair back and stormed out, slamming the door. That was the last time I physically saw Patrick. I only got occasional updates about him in the following months through my mom. He'd relocated from his place, got rid of most of his possessions, and was temporarily living on a friend's sofa. His well-paying employment terminated. His acquaintances vanished. It seemed like everything in his world had fallen apart so quickly. While I felt a twinge of sympathy, I also knew it wasn't my duty to come to his aid. Patrick had spent years belittling me, making fun of my efforts and acting like he was untouchable. Now he was experiencing the consequences of his own choices. The whole thing ended up coming about in a way I never would have guessed. One day, totally out of the blue, I received a letter in the post. It was from Patrick. I almost didn't open it, figuring it'd be another request for cash or a half-hearted attempt to say sorry. But when I finally unfolded the paper, I was shocked at what I saw. "Herbert, I'm not sure if you will even read this, but I have to say it. I'm truly sorry for everything. The way I behaved towards you, for my words, for thinking I was superior to you. I was mistaken. You've always been the better person, and I see that now. Seeing you create your life from scratch while I let mine fall apart has been humbling. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't hold it against you for cutting me off, but I wanted you to realize that I'm attempting to change. Thank you for standing up for yourself. It was the eye-opener that I needed. Patrick." I read the letter twice, then carefully folded it. I carefully put it back in the envelope. I had no idea what I should do, and I was uncertain how to process all of this. However, I had the sense, something I hadn't experienced in ages, that Patrick might finally be able to transform. And even though I wasn't prepared to reintegrate him into my world right now, I also understood that this couldn't possibly be the final chapter. Possibly, just possibly, we might eventually return to being brothers again.